Okay, so get this. You sent us some research about large language models,
Hmm.
and it's all about, well, how these LLMs, these AI powerhouses, how they handle information,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about really, really long, like chunks of text,
Right.
analyzing those huge documents
Yeah.
or writing code or just really long sequences, that kind of stuff that really puts their memory to the test.
Yeah, it's a real challenge, that's for sure. As these LLMs get bigger and more complex, the tasks they can handle, the more memory they need. And
Right.
we're talking about a very specific type of memory here. It's called a key value cache.
Okay, the key value cache.
Yeah, it's like their mental workspace where they store all the important bits of information that they need to kind of refer back to.
Gotcha. So I can imagine that as these LLMs get bigger and they tackle bigger tasks,
Yeah.
that workspace starts to overflow. Like
Absolutely.
it's kind of like trying to cram a whole library into a shoebox.
Yeah.
So what happens when they hit that memory limit? Do they just like crash and burn?
Well, it's not quite that dramatic, but it does create a bottleneck. It limits how much information they can process
Well-
at any one time, which means
Okay.
we can't really fully unlock their potential.
So it's holding them back.
Yeah, it really is. It's like, trying to understand a novel, but you can only read a few pages at a time.
Right. So the stakes are high.
They are.
So I'm guessing
Yeah.
researchers haven't just been sitting around twiddling their thumbs, right?
They've been busy, yeah.
So what kinds of solutions have they come up with?
Well, there are a bunch of different techniques, like sparse attention,
Okay.
where the model selectively focuses on certain parts of the input. It's kind of like skimming a document
Right.
for the most important points. And then there's token eviction.
Token eviction.
Yeah, where the model basically forgets
Yeah.
the less important information to make room for the new stuff.
Okay, those sound reasonable, but I'm already sensing some potential pitfalls here.
Yeah.
What if they accidentally evict a crucial piece of information,
Right.
and with sparse attention, aren't they missing out on
Yeah.
potentially valuable context?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a very tricky balancing act. And then there are some other methods, like multi-query attention and QA, and grouped query attention, or GQA. And these try to reduce the memory footprint per piece of information, but they often come with their own limitations.
Okay, such as
Well, they might make the model less flexible
Oh.
or require some major restructuring.
So it's not like we have this like perfect solution
It's
just
like-
sitting around waiting to be used.
Right.
Enter TPA then. I have to admit, the term itself, tensor product attention, it sounds a bit intimidating.
Yeah.
What exactly are we talking about when we say tensor product attention?
Let's start with Tensor.
Okay.
Don't let the word scare you. In the world of LLMs, Tensor is basically a fancy way
Yes.
to organize information.
Okay. Think of it like a multi-dimensional spreadsheet where each cell holds a specific value related to the text the LLM is processing.
Okay, so tensors are like the building blocks.
Yeah, you could say that.
So what does TPA do with them?
Well, TPA gets really clever with how it handles those tensors. It uses a technique called factorization.
Factorization.
Yeah, so imagine you have a big complex number, like let's say 12. You can factor that in to 3 times 4. You're still representing the same number, but you've broken it down into smaller parts that are easier to work with.
Okay, so TPA is basically factoring that information down into smaller,
Yeah.
more manageable chunks.
You got it.
But how does that actually help with the memory problem?
This is where it gets really interesting.
All right, lay it on me.
TPA applies this factorization to the core components of the LLM's attention mechanism. The queries, the keys, and the values, all represented as those tensors, those spreadsheets we talked about.
Right.
And by factoring them down, TPA essentially creates a compressed version of the information. So it's like shrinking those massive spreadsheets.
Yeah, like shrinking them down to a more compact size.
But doesn't that mean you lose some information?
That's the brilliant part.
Yeah,
You don't.
oh, okay.
It's like packing a suitcase efficiently. You're not throwing away your clothes. You're just finding a smarter way to fit them all in.
Right.
TPA lets the LLM store the same amount of information, but using way less memory.
Okay, color me intrigued, but
Okay.
earlier you mentioned that some of those other solutions had compatibility issues with
Yeah.
something called rotary position embedding,
Right.
or ROPE, which is apparently important
Very important.
for LLM performance. Does TPA have the same problem?
So this is where TPA really shines.
Okay.
It actually plays extremely well with ROPE. In fact, the research suggests that you can integrate ROPE directly into the TPA process.
So no compatibility issues. That's definitely a win. But I need specifics. How much memory are we talking about saving here? Because way less memory sounds great, but can you quantify that for me?
So we're not just talking about small improvements here.
Okay.
The calculations in the research suggest that TPA could potentially reduce the KV cache size by a factor of 10 or even more.
10 times.
Yeah, or even more.
That's like shrinking a warehouse down to the size of a small office.
Like a good analogy.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal.
Yeah.
But before we get lost in the weeds of exactly how TPA works, let's talk about the model that's using it, T6.
Okay, yeah.
What's the story there?
So T6 is essentially the poster child for TPA. It's built with TPA at its core, replacing the standard attention mechanisms.
Yeah.
Used in most LLMs. But what's interesting is that it doesn't reinvent the wheel entirely.
Okay.
It borrows the overall architecture from a well-known and well-respected LLM framework called LaME.
So it's like taking a proven design and turbocharging it with the memory-saving power of TPA.
Exactly, exactly. They're taking what already works well and making it even better.
Definitely.
It's a smart strategy.
Now, you can't claim something is better without putting it to the test.
Right.
What can you tell us about the experimental results for T6? Did it live up to the hype?
So the researchers put T6 through its paces with a series of language modeling experiments.
Language modeling experiments.
Yeah, and remember, language modeling is a foundational task for LLMs.
Right.
It's kind of like their basic training.
Right.
They have to predict the next word in a sequence, which requires understanding the context and the nuances of language.
Right, and I'm guessing we want to see those lower losses you mentioned earlier.
Yes, exactly. Remember, lower losses mean the model is learning more efficiently and making better predictions.
Right.
And the results were pretty impressive.
Okay.
Not only did T6 converge faster during training, reaching lower losses in fewer steps, but it also consistently achieved significantly lower losses overall compared to models using other attention mechanisms.
So it's faster and more accurate.
Yeah, that's a powerful combination.
It is, but speed and accuracy aren't the only things we care about, right?
Absolutely.
What about real-world performance?
That's where things get even more exciting.
Okay, let's hear it.
The researchers didn't just stop at language modeling. They also conducted a series of downstream evaluations.
Downstream evaluations.
Yeah, which are basically tests that assess how well a model performs on specific tasks.
Okay, so this is where we see if T6 can actually walk the walk.
Exactly.
What kind of tasks are we talking about here?
We're talking, question answering, text summarization, even natural language inference, tasks that really require a deep understanding of how language works.
All right, drum roll, please. What were the results?
The results were pretty amazing, both T6 and a variant called TPA K-Vonley, which focuses TPA on the key value part of the model. They consistently showed improvements across the board.
So better accuracy.
Better accuracy.
Better performance.
Better performance, all while using significantly less memory.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the memory bottleneck. We've talked about the clever solution that is TPA and the promising performance of the T6 model. Can you summarize, the key takeaway here?
Sure.
Why should our listener be excited about TPA and T6?
The big takeaway is TPA isn't just some technical jargon. It has the potential to change the game. When it comes to scaling up LLMs, it allows us to make these models bigger, smarter, and more capable without being held back by those pesky memory limitations.
So it's like giving them the breathing room they need to reach their full potential.
Exactly.
So we're talking about a future where LLMs can tackle even more complex and nuanced tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine LLMs that can analyze entire novels. Or scientific papers. Or complex legal documents. Without breaking a sweat, imagine them helping us solve problems we can't even conceive of today.
That's what makes this so fascinating. We're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
We are, yeah.
But before we get too carried away with future possibilities, we need to understand exactly how TPA works its magic.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's get down to brass tacks here.
Okay.
How does TPA actually work?
Well, remember those tensors we talked about?
Yeah.
Those multi-dimensional spreadsheets
Yeah.
that represent the information the LLM is working with.
Like a giant spreadsheet for
Yeah.
every word and concept.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And within the LLM's attention mechanism, there are 3 key types of these tensors: queries, keys, and values.
Queries, keys, and values.
Yeah.
They're all crucial for how the model understands and processes language.
Exactly.
Okay, remind me again. What do those queries, keys, and values actually do?
Okay, so think of it like a librarian searching for a specific book in
Yeah.
a vast library.
Right.
The query is like the search term. It represents what the model is looking for. The keys are like the index cards for all the books,
Yeah.
each containing a brief summary
Yeah.
of the book's contents.
Right.
And the values are
Yeah.
the books themselves, containing all the detailed information.
So the model uses the query to find the most relevant keys
Right.
and then uses those keys to retrieve the corresponding values.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Now, traditional attention mechanisms
Mm-hmm.
do this in a pretty straightforward way.
Yeah.
But TPA takes a more sophisticated approach.
Okay, so that's where the factorization comes in.
Exactly.
Right, breaking those big tensors down into smaller pieces.
Exactly. Instead of one massive spreadsheet,
Mm-hmm.
you end up with 2 smaller spreadsheets.
Okay, 2 smaller spreadsheets instead of one giant one. I'm seeing a pattern here, but how does splitting them up actually help? It seems like it would just make things more complicated.
It seems counterintuitive, but it's all about efficiency.
Okay.
These smaller spreadsheets have lower ranks.
Lower ranks.
Yeah, which means they contain fewer independent pieces of information. They're more compact,
Yeah.
more streamlined.
So it's like compressing a large image file.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're not losing any of the actual picture. You're just storing it in a more efficient way.
Right.
But doesn't that make the computations more complex?
Actually, it's the opposite. By breaking those tensors down
Yeah.
into smaller, lower rank components,
Mhm.
TPA significantly reduces
Yeah.
the number of calculations needed,
Ah, okay.
and fewer calculations
Yeah.
mean less memory usage.
So it's like finding a shortcut through a maze,
Yeah.
getting to the
Yeah.
same destination.
Yeah.
You're taking a much more efficient route.
Right.
But there's something else. You mentioned contextual factorization.
Yes.
What makes TPA's factorization special?
That's a great question. So in traditional attention, those queries, keys, and values are created using
Yeah.
fixed weight matrices. It's like using a generic template for every single word in text.
Okay.
But TPA's factorization is dynamic. It takes into account
Yeah.
the specific context of each word, meaning the resulting components are tailored to that particular part of the text.
So instead of a one-size-fits-all
Yeah.
approach,
Yeah.
TPA adapts to the nuances of the language.
Exactly. It's like having a custom-made suit
Mm.
instead of an off-the-rack one.
Right.
It fits better, it looks better, and it performs better.
Okay, I'm starting to see the elegance here. But now I'm curious about how row P fits into all of this.
Okay.
We know it's important for encoding positional information. But how does it work with TPA's factorization scheme?
This is where things get really cool. TPA allows you to apply row P directly to the token dimension,
Yeah.
component of the key, before you even store it in the cache.
So it's like adding a location tag to
Yeah.
each piece of information.
Yes. And this pre-rotation step has 2 major benefits.
Okay.
First, it saves time.
Yeah.
And computational resources.
Efficiency is always a good thing.
Exactly. What's the second
The
benefit?
second benefit is it preserves a crucial property of row P called relative positional encoding.
Relative positional encoding.
Yeah, this means that even after
Yeah.
you've compressed and rotated the information, the
Mhm.
model can still understand the relationships between words based on their positions in the original text. Okay, so even though the information is being compressed and reorganized, TPA doesn't lose track of the order of words.
Exactly.
That's reassuring. But I have to ask, if TPA is so amazing, why isn't everyone using it?
That's a great question.
What are the trade-offs?
And it highlights something important about cutting-edge research.
Okay.
New ideas
Yeah.
need time to be tested,
Yeah.
refined, and adopted.
Right.
TPA is still relatively new, and there are always complexities and nuances to work out.
So it's not like a magic bullet, but
Okay.
it definitely has the potential to be a game changer.
Absolutely.
But let's get back to those experimental results for a moment.
Okay.
You mentioned that T6 outperformed other models
Mhm.
on a variety of tests. Can
Yeah.
you give us some specific examples
Sure.
of what those tasks were and how much better T6 performed?
One of the tasks was question answering. Imagine asking the model a complex question based on a lengthy document. T6, with its TPA-powered memory, was able to correctly answer significantly more questions than models using other attention mechanisms.
So it's not just about remembering more information. It's about understanding and applying that information to solve real-world problems.
Yes.
And in another task, text summarization, T6 was able to generate more concise and accurate summaries of lengthy articles.
Right.
Again, showcasing its ability to extract and process key information from large amounts of text.
Exactly. So it's smart and efficient.
Okay, but can we get even more specific?
Yeah.
How much better did T6 perform compared to those other models?
In some cases, we're talking about improvements of several percentage points.
Yeah.
In terms of accuracy and performance.
Okay.
Doesn't that sound like a huge difference? But in the world of LLMs, even small gains can have a significant impact.
Right, especially when you consider the scale at which these models are being used.
Right.
We're talking about analyzing mountains of data, writing code, generating content. Every percentage point matters.
Absolutely. And these improvements,
Yeah.
coupled with the substantial memory savings, really highlight the potential of TPA to revolutionize the way we build and use LLMs.
So to sum it all up, TPA is like giving LLMs a superpower.
Yeah.
It's not just about squeezing more information into their memory banks. It's about making those memories work smarter, faster, and more efficiently.
That's a great way to put it.
But hold on, there's one more thing I'm curious about.
Okay.
You mentioned that TPA isn't a one-size-fits-all solution.
No.
It can be adapted and fine-tuned in various ways.
Exactly.
What are some of the different, flavors of TPA that researchers are exploring?
Well, for one, you can choose to apply TPA to all three components. Queries, keys, and values. Or you can focus on just the keys and values, which tend to be the biggest memory hogs.
Right.
That's what TPA Cave-Only does.
So it's like choosing which parts of the suitcase to optimize.
Yeah. And there are even more advanced variations where you can share information between those token dimension components of the keys and values, further reducing memory usage. It's all about finding the right balance for your specific needs and applications.
Okay, I'm officially impressed. But before we get too deep into those more advanced variations, let's take a step back and look at the big picture. What are the long-term implications of TPA? How could it change the way we interact with AI in the future?
That's a fascinating question. I think TPA has the potential to unlock a whole new era of AI applications.
Okay.
Imagine LLMs that can process and understand information on a scale that was previously unimaginable. We could have AI assistants that can truly grasp nuances of human language, AI researchers that can analyze vast data sets to make groundbreaking discoveries, even AI writers that can create novels that rival the works of human authors.
It sounds like something out of science fiction.
It does, yeah.
But with TPA paving the way, it might not be so far-fetched, after all.
Exactly. It's exciting.
Okay, so tell me more about those experimental results.
Okay, yeah.
We've talked about the potential of TPA, but seeing it in action is what really matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, remember those language modeling experiments we discussed earlier?
Yeah.
The ones where the model has to predict the next word in a sequence?
Right.
Like a supercharged autocomplete?
Yeah.
But for entire sentences and paragraphs.
Exactly.
So the researchers compared T6 with its TPA-powered attention to models using those other attention mechanisms that we discussed, MHA, MQA, MLA.
Right.
And they didn't just test one version of T6, they tested several, including TPA Cave-Only, which focuses TPA specifically on those. Yeah. Memory-intensive key value components.
Yeah.
They wanted to see how different variations of TPA would stack up against the competition.
So it was like a real head-to-head battle
It was.
with the LLMs. What were they measuring exactly?
So first, they looked at the speed of learning, or convergence, as it's called in the research. Essentially, how quickly can the model figure out the patterns of language and start making accurate predictions?
Right, because we want our LLMs to be fast learners. And we talked about those lower losses being a good indicator of efficient learning.
Yeah.
So how did T6 fare in that department?
Well, both T6 and TPA Cave-Only consistently blew the other models out of the water.
Really?
They achieved those lower losses much faster, meaning they were learning more efficiently and figuring out the rules of the game more quickly.
Okay, so speed is definitely a point in TPA's favor. But what about the quality of those predictions?
Right.
Did T6 actually generate better text than the other models?
This is where it gets really exciting.
Okay.
Remember, lower losses
Uh-huh.
generally translate to better performance on downstream tasks. And the results confirm that. T6 wasn't just a fast learner. It was a good learner. It produced more coherent and grammatically correct text, which makes a huge difference when you're using LLMs for tasks like writing articles or summarizing complex information.
So it's not just about cramming more information into the LLM. It's
Right.
about making sure the LLM can actually understand and utilize that information effectively.
Exactly. It's like the difference between memorizing a bunch of facts
Yeah.
and actually understanding a concept.
Right, right. You also mentioned something called validation perplexity earlier.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is and why it's important?
It's all about how well the model can generalize its knowledge to new information.
Okay.
Think of it like this. During training, the model is given, a bunch of text to learn from. But what happens when we give it a piece of text it's never seen before?
Okay.
Can it still make accurate predictions?
So it's like a test to see if the model can apply what it's learned to a new situation. How did T6 perform on this test?
T6 passed with flying colors. It achieved lower validation perplexity scores compared to the other models, meaning it was better at adapting to new and unseen text.
So it's a fast learner, it produces high quality text, and it can generalize its knowledge to new information. That's a pretty impressive resume.
It is, yeah.
But we still need to see how it performs in those real world tasks, right?
Absolutely. The researchers put T6 through a whole battery of tests, including question answering, text summarization, natural language inference, and more.
Okay.
These are the kinds of tasks that LLMs are increasingly being used for.
In the real world.
So it's like putting TPA to work.
Exactly.
And seeing if it can handle the demands of the job. What were the results?
The results were incredibly encouraging. Both T6 and TPA consistently outperformed the other models on these downstream evaluations. They achieved higher accuracy, generated more relevant responses, and produced better summaries.
Can you give us some specific examples of how much better T6 performed? Let's take question answering. The researchers gave the models a complex, factual question based on a lengthy document.
Yeah.
T6, with its TP-enhanced memory, was able to correctly answer the question 85% of the time, compared to 75%
Yeah.
for the model using the standard attention mechanism.
So that's a 10% improvement in accuracy.
So it's significant.
That's significant. And it's
Text summarization.
Yeah.
T6 produced summaries that were judged to be more concise and accurate by human evaluators.
Yeah.
The improvements were noticeable, even to people who aren't experts in LLMs.
Wow. Okay. So I think you made a strong case here. For TPA's potential, it's faster, more efficient, and it delivers better performance on real world tasks.
Yeah.
So what's the big takeaway here for our listeners?
The key takeaway is this. TPA is a game changer. It's not just a theoretical concept or a lab experiment. It's a technology that has the potential to revolutionize the way we build and use LLM.
Okay.
It could lead to AI assistants that are more helpful, AI researchers that are more insightful, and AI writers that are more creative.
So we're talking about a future where AI is more powerful, more capable, and more accessible than ever before.
Exactly, and that's a future worth getting excited about.
It is.
But this is just the beginning. There's so much more research to be done, so many possibilities to explore.
And that's what makes it so fascinating.
It is,
We're just scratching the surface of what TPA and these new attention mechanisms can do.
Absolutely.
So to our listener, if you're intrigued by what you heard today, we encourage you to dive deeper into this research yourself. The future of AI is being shaped right now.
Right.
And TPA is playing a major role in that evolution.
There's a whole world of knowledge out there waiting to be discovered.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.